welcome to the SJ Childs Show. I'm your host, Sarah SJ Childs, and today I have special guests Akaya and Rajasvini. I am excited to get into this conversation with them today. They have a book that they have written together, The Joy of Leadership. My notes, of course, just went away on my screen, and so I hope I'm saying that correctly. Thank you so much, ladies, for being here today.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm really glad to be here. And the title of the book is Leading with Joy. It's interesting that you called it Joy of Leadership because that's the title we originally had been playing with. So you must have been picking up on some kind of wavelength that, and we just over time decided it was really about leadership. So, and with joy. So, glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Tell me how you two came to meet and bring this together.
Rajasvini, why don't you take this?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Sarah. Lovely to meet you. I love that little "just be awesome" behind you. We were just being awesome in my backyard together when Akaya proposed we write a book together. And after a relationship that's now spanned over 12 years, it felt easy to say, yes, let's. Both of us in our own coaching practice as leaders of organizations, as well as leadership trainers, we're seeing some patterns coming up in a recurring fashion. We were noticing just when we need our leaders to be at their joyful best to mitigate all the complexities of this time, some of our best folks were burning out and in a place of despair. And we felt like we needed to have an offering that would support people in these times. So that's how the book came about.
So important and wonderful that you would give that care and concern to help share, and sounds like joint experiences of being able to lead with joy. Tell us about how that is possible in these days.
It's not just possible, it's actually, we see it as a responsibility for leaders to create the conditions whereby joy is possible, right? Because there's no way that if I were a leader in the world or in an organization that I could say, oh, it's my job to make you, whoever the you is, joyful. Couldn't do it. I'd have to go back to bed. But to think about, there are conditions that can make leadership joy possible, right? And each of us, I think it's a human thing, have had moments of joy. So for me to say, this is how I've experienced joy. Let's talk about how we might experience joy. And it is kind of paradoxical, perhaps, in these times these are hard times for folks, and as Rajasvini mentioned, people are burning out, and they're being, there's a lot of despair, and the medicine, let's call it, for despair and burnout, we believe, is practicing joy, and we talk about it as a practice. It's not something that you just go to the store and get, or go for a weekend seminar and all of a sudden you're joyous for the rest of your life. We have to create conditions in our own lives wherein joy is possible, and then practice them. I've noticed, and I'm interested in what you've got to say, Rajasvini, notice that as I've practiced joy because I've had to, we wrote this book, and I said, I guess I better start doing what we're saying we should do. And Sarah, I have to practice it. It's not just an everyday state. And I hadn't been aware of how much it requires commitment and intention.
That's so true. Yeah, I'd love to hear, your opinion on that as well. And then I want to talk about what it might look like to go through burnout and what some warning signs for people might be.
Yeah, let's go there.
Definitely. Please, yes, let us know. What do you consider maybe the top five? Well, I don't know if there's even a number that you could put on it, but what are some warning signs for individuals that might be going through burnout and not recognizing it in their leading?
Mm. Well, I can speak from my own experience. When I have teetered at the edge of needing a reset, it's often been that I'm irritable. Everything's a rub. Everybody seems to get on my nerves. Things that I would have a lot more patience and acceptance for, particularly as a leader of an organization that employs many people with very different personality across generation, race, class, culture, genders. It can be easy to get short and annoyed, and that's a sign that there's some level of saturation happening. When I am finding, for me, another huge sign is when I become controlling. Mm-hmm. When I need to control an outcome, a conversation, an agenda. I tend to pride myself on being a strategic, generative, creative leader. But when I start to get into the minutiae of other people's work, that's a sign that I'm having a hard time staying in my own lane. I mean, of course, there are times where it's appropriate, where balls are being dropped and you want to check in and see with your colleagues what's going on. But that should be very rare, not the norm. When personal relationships start to suffer and when the things that usually fuel me are not as easily accessible by my own design. We are so good as human beings to kind of perpetuate our own kind of narrative and our own misery. And so we have to actually work really hard. I know in my case, I have to be very mindful that I'm not going down the spiral of negative thinking, and that I'm actually taking the space, creating internal space and spaciousness in my environment to make sure I'm truly sitting with what's happening rather than running with the story of it. So those are my signs usually. I would say one skill I've developed over the years is to also see these signs in others. And there's a lot of power of a simple, authentic check-in with colleagues and friends, and certainly people who report to me to see how they're doing, and if there's anything I can do to support them and to ease the burden on them. And often that makes people really, tap into maybe something they're not seeing, or at least take a pause and consider that mirroring to be useful. So.
Oh, I love that. I think it's important that we can try to be aware of when we are having those, like you said, getting irritated. I can completely agree with a lot of the things that you said. And I don't have people that are working under me, but children. I mean, that's sometimes it just is difficult and fun at the same time. But you really not let yourself go down the rabbit holes of controlling and things, because yes, it does. It spins you into definitely a deficit of the other things that you're not giving precedence to in your life. Yeah. What is your opinion on that, Akaya?
Pretty much, what Rajasvini said. It takes a huge toll on ourselves, and in some ways, strangely enough, burnout or kind of I work myself into an early grave is almost gets kudos in this world, right? So, she must really care about this. That's how she's always tired. She's always bitter. Because she really cares about this. And I actually want to interrupt that notion that if we're going to, create loving, inclusive neighborhoods and schools and communities, which is what you're about, then we're going to need to bring elements of joy and delight and celebration to that, even if the work is hard, right?
Yes.
I've noticed that, I'm a boomer, and so we learn to work hard and keep working and then work, right?
Right.
And don't rest. And when I talk with younger people, they're saying, I don't want to look like that as I lead. I want to lead, and we want to lead in new ways that isn't about sacrificing ourselves on the altar of overwork, right? So, and that's partly why we said, well, let's write this book on joy, because imagine what if our educators and our leaders and the of both for-profits and nonprofits really saw themselves as potentially joyful people, and that we can create joyful neighborhoods and communities. What if that were just normal?
That's my hope.
Right? And then if things got terrible and vicious and hurtful, that we would stop and say, let's not do it this way anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings up some thoughts to me of a recent, I guess, situation and things that I think October is National Bullying Awareness Month. What about bullying in the workplace? I mean, for adults, people think of bullying and they think of a little kid getting pushed over in the playground, but that's just not the case, is it? It exists in a much larger form in adults and in the workplace. How do we try to navigate those, to teach those people to find joy and not use those fear and control tactics? I'll let you guys choose who takes the question.
I'll take a first pass if that's okay. Well, we live in a culture that allows for bullying. When we look at our national leadership, there's a lot of bullying going on. And so then our kids get the information that that's okay. And in fact, that's how you get your way, right? So that we would play that out in our organizations, and that would play out in our organizations and businesses and schools makes complete sense to me, because that's not true. We aren't challenging it at the national level or on the political levels to say this just isn't acceptable here. So we've got to find some ways to interrupt that. And one, nobody loves bullying. I believe this, even the bully doesn't love bullying. The bully bullies because they have been bullied.
Yeah.
And so here's where we go into how can we develop a culture of kindness and understanding that if you're not well, I'm not well. And your well-being is inextricably linked to mine, even if we don't know each other. Now, this may sound a little pie in the sky, and perhaps it is, but I know that there are cultures and have been cultures wherein bullying was not an acceptable part of it.
Yeah.
And I think we can do better.
I agree. 1,000% I agree. And I agree that it needs to be taken way up on our national leadership levels. That is where, if they want change in the nation, that's where they need to start the change and be the example, be the role models, if they're such great leaders, to take that and really make the appropriate actions to take those steps. And who knows what those are? There's, unfortunately, we don't have a YouTube video we can go to watch to find that out. Maybe somebody can make one of these days. But social justice, right? It's so necessary. What type of practices do you share to help build joy in your leadership?
Yeah. In the book, it's chock full of practices, and we share some simple ones, some that require personal, interpersonal kind of dialogue, some that require things you can do with the team of people. because really, joy is a choice, right? We talk about that in our book too. We can choose to build work cultures that are all about grinding, grinding and perpetuate this idea that things always have to be hard, things always have to be intense. There has to be a sense of fear and competition, or we can, as leaders, have a role in shaping culture where great, excellent, transformative work happens, but with a spirit of joy, with a spirit of kindness, with a spirit of compassion and empathy. And these aren't just words, these aren't just empty words, but these are
real life. It's totally fine.
but values that really we can each have a set of tools that we can live up to. And so that's the piece that excites us. And part of what we offer are stories and practices that help us do that as almost a daily practice, as well as something to learn and play with together. By no means are we saying this is the roadmap, do it this way, or else there will be a joyless workplace. What we're saying is we've run some experiments in our life, and these experiments have taught us some lessons that we're so grateful to be able to share.
An example of that is for me personally, and the book is full of personal stories that link to our larger ideas. But I'm a gardener, and I have learned that if I don't put my hands in the dirt once a day, I'm not as grounded, as it were, as I need to be, right? So I create some time before I start my work day to go out and say hello to my tomatoes or whatever's growing, and thank the roses and remember that I'm part of the natural world. I'm not separate from it. And then when I remember that, how else can I be but joyful, right? And so, I practice that by every day. I go, oh yeah, hello, orange tree. I live in Oakland, California, so I can have an orange tree. And thank you for growing here. And yes, I'm part of it. So when I sit down at my desk, I'm centered, I'm ready. I'm going to be less reactive. I'm going to have more patience, but I have to remember to do it, right? And so finding a practice that works for you is what's important here. Okay, so because somebody else might go, put my hands in the dirt, ew, then that's getting out in the garden's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But something is, and we trust that each leader can find what that thing or many things might be.
And consistency, really, I like how you said that. Consistency really helps to tie those things in so that it's a daily practice that is mindful but not thought. How does that work here? Yeah, you're not having to use thoughts to do it, but it's mindful, like you're doing it out of practice. So I think that those are really great things. I just had a thought. Don't you hate it?
Yes. Yes. What's important here that it needs to not be on your to-do list, right? Yeah. Because then it becomes another obligation, and then it becomes I've got to create time for it, and then it's got to. Next thing you know, I'm bitter and burnt out, right? So to understand what it's for, why we're reaching for joy, that's really important, all right? That because I really don't want it to become an obligation. It's almost like drinking water. It's just good for us.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that the truth? And when we can put those practices into our daily lives, and we can achieve so much more, put more on our real to-do list, the things that we really need to do, but be mindful of taking care of ourselves. And self-care is so important. Of course, you all hear me say, if your cup is not full, you cannot fill the ones around you. And it's so funny. I heard somebody say something the other day about, well, if I'm giving too much help, to this, then I can't help in this space, and I can't help, and I can't help. It was to help somebody out with another event, and they were saying, oh, it would just be so much work off my plate. And then somebody stepped in and said, just doing maybe a post or helping something out isn't going to ruin your day or take everything off your list. Like, you can still offer ways to help. And she said, when we realize that we are a flame, and when we're a light, lighting others doesn't diminish our own flame. And I love that she said that, because it is so important that we try to lift others through, and it doesn't diminish our own selves by doing so. I'm gonna have to,
In fact, it gives us energy.
I agree.
Right? It's not about being diminished. It fills us up.
Yeah, I would definitely say it does fill us up. When I tell parents, I think that business and parenting can be a lot alike. And you can run a good parent, and you can run a good business, and you can be doing all the right things, but things can still go wrong. But you can also be running a not so fine business, and things could definitely be going wrong. And when it comes down to setting your own personal goals for a team, what type of ideas do you give your team as far as like coming together and having, group meetings, like you had said? What kind of advice do you give leaders to bring their teams up from maybe in a spot they're at?
So sorry.
You're good.
I don't know what is happening, but Akaya pointed out there's a glare, and then the sound is cutting in and out. Anyway, we are working in the Zoom universe.
That's for sure.
So you were asking about working with teams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so this piece, we often think that different standards apply about our practices individually, whether we're entrepreneurs or coaches or individuals versus working with teams. And the truth about it is the same practices apply. Yeah. Often when we're working with teams, it becomes even more important to practice at an individual level. Because it's, you talk to so many parents, and I got a chance to watch some of your previous shows, and your parenting advice is so wonderful.
Well, thank you.
But it's so much about what we do, not just what we say. The same thing applies in leadership. It is about if we are talking a great game about people taking care of themselves, and yet we are modeling working in a frenetic, crazed way, it doesn't really add up. People then are watching you as a leader going, oh, you're sending me emails at midnight, and then you're telling me to not overwork. Or the opposite, often we don't take time as leaders often to actually notice what's going on in our teams. We are so busy driving our own agenda and proving ourselves. And I feel like this is something women in particular have to be really mindful of. So much of the social messages we've been conditioned by have been about needing to prove our worth at all times, that we can lose track of the fact that in our own frenzy to prove ourselves, we are not attuned to what's happening in the environment around us, right? Or we can do it to such a degree that we become such nurturers and such enablers that we don't have healthy boundaries, right? And then we find ourselves up late at night worrying about everybody and everybody's kid and everybody's spouse and everybody's personal needs, and unable to kind of have some healthy boundaries between what's ours to hold and what's not ours to hold. So I think this is where those kind of daily practices become really important, because it's a way to reset our own selves and to reground in our purpose, and to not get carried away by the many worries that are coming at it at all times.
I love how you said that. That is definitely true. And we don't want to in helping others take on those types of things, because it's not healthy for us. It's healthy for us to do with and not for. Then I think that's really important to look at in leadership too.
I also think it might be interesting, and I don't think I've talked about this yet, Rajasvini, but like what I'm thinking, I'm not a parent, but I'm imagining like what would a family conversation about how do we want to be joyful?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what would that look like? Right? Who and what might we do when we're angry with each other? That we can move ourselves out of anger. And I'm not disrespecting anger, because sometimes there's reason to be angry, right?
Sure.
But we don't want to live there.
Mm.
So when we've had enough, whatever, anger, despair, whatever the thing is, how can we as a family or an organization shift? What are the signs that tell us, oh, we've been in this too long now, it's time to shift, time to let something down. Let's take a breath, whatever that might look like, and then turn toward joy. And again, not as a Pollyanna, we don't want to deal with the hard stuff. That's not what we're talking about here. But to have some collective agreements about, oh, we're in that place where our upset or anger is actually not productive. It's getting in our way. And we do have some practices around collective well-being, call that joy. How might we go about that? And I hadn't thought about it in the context of a single family, but certainly.
Yeah. Joy. My head just said something perfect, and then it popped right out again. What is my brain doing today? It's like making sure that your joy is aligned, right? Finding that right alignment for your family. And it's so interesting, as when I was an earlier parent, I parented a stepchild, and in that parenting style, I did a lot of yelling. And it wasn't too attractive to parenting style. And the thing about being able to do something like this and the authenticity in that is to say, I see what I could do better now with these next children, coming up to raise. And there's 10 years between the two. So it gives me a very broad perspective. But there was a time when I said, well, how do I stop yelling? How does one teach themselves to just stop yelling? And so I thought about it, and I decided, okay, every time I yell, I'm going to yell, I want to yell right now. And, after several times of yelling that, you sound ridiculous, and it's really, it catches you. It makes you like, okay, just like we had talked about earlier, catching yourselves in those moments where you're like, I've learned better. I'm going to put it into action, and I'm going to move forward with this. Come, now 12 years later, our parenting style is 1,000% different. We think so much more successful. And going back to the idea that women have to find their value. When my daughter was young, I told her, how people say, oh, who do you love the most? You love grandma the most, whatever, those types of things. And in that situation, I told my daughter, you always say me. You always say, I'm number one. I'm number one to myself. I always hold myself first. And I, told her, I don't want you to do this selfishly out in the world, but I want you to think of it as a way that it's like self-protective. Like you always come first for yourself. Now, having that different type of individual now, I don't know how to parent her. She is a whole nother, kind of being of her own. And she has all of this self-confidence and this power and empowerment that I never had, that my mom never had, that I was never shown that a woman could have. And so I'm trying to say, okay, how do I keep this going, push her in all of the right directions with this strength that she has, and how to make sure she doesn't go out of the wrong boundaries with that. But I think it comes down to that authenticity of things. And you can use that in leadership.
Well, part of it, I think, is trusting that she, like all of us, will learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every leader I know is in some learning process,
Yeah.
right? We never stop learning. I think the minute we stop learning, then we tend to die.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm celebrating your daughter and celebrating the fact that you're not quite sure how to parent her because you weren't parented that way, and neither was your mother and her mother or whatever, right? So what happened here in one generation, you broke the chain
Yes,
of putting ourselves last,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so I'm celebrating that because that means if and should she has a daughter, or she will certainly influence younger girls when she gets older, she'll give them that message too. And that's, I find, completely joyous.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm.
And she'll learn, she'll make mistakes. We all do. Right?
Yeah.
And if there's the joy of it in some ways. When I look back on things that were so hard because I made some decisions then that I would not make now, which I won't go into any of the
hindsight. Yeah.
At the same, I can look back and go, no, I would not do that now, but I'm so glad I did, because at the time it seemed like that was a really great thing to do. It turned out not to be in retrospect. However, I can look back on it, being joyful that I went through it, or whatever it was, right? And I learned from it, and that I'm the person I am today as a result of it. So, yeah, I'm appreciating your daughter saying, yeah, I'm going to be me.
Thank you. Yeah. I didn't know if you were going to unmute your mic over there. So I was just giving you a moment.
Yeah, I was, this conversation is making me think of this lovely story that Akaya has in our book about her mom, and just pledging not to have a life of struggle and overwork, because that's what her mom had to do. And, I'm thinking about women of color, people of working class backgrounds that have it's not that their parents did not know how to do joy. Sure did. I wish they did have more space for it, more time for it, more resources to have the kind of lives we get to have. But also, how useless guilt can be. Instead of staying in a place of so then I should suffer and struggle too. How to remember that all we do is intergenerational, and we set the circumstances so that the ones after us don't have to struggle in the same way, and truly believe that. I often wonder, I don't have a child, but I'd have helped raise a lot of nephews and nieces, and the genuine unconditional joy and love I feel when their lives are easier than mine has been. It's true. And I can also see that sometimes one can feel somewhat competitive with the next generation because some things come a little too easy. And you're like, oh my goodness, are you going to learn the lessons that I had to learn the hard way? But they are. I think this conversation is reminding me that we don't get to, again, control how they learn or have them simulate the same circumstances as we did. I came out at a very young age in a time when there weren't a lot of out queer lesbian women from India. And, now when I meet all these young LGBTQ people without a care in the world, free, without all the internal turmoil, I am so glad. And, I'm like, don't feel like I have to take people backwards into a time when it was just an impossibility, but instead celebrate that it's so much more easeful. So,
yeah. And our mindsets are really our responsibility, I think. And you kind of said that too, Akaya, about responsibility. And I think that people need better resources so that they can gain a better sense of joy and how to achieve it, but not staying in that victim mindset, in that guilt or victim mindset, and really being responsible to get yourself out of those when you start seeing, physical signs, like you said, or emotional or mental signs of that, and being able to help others when you see others going down that road. What would you give advice to someone who you see is like in a mental pit, basically? How would you advise them to work themselves out of that?
First of all, I wouldn't give them advice. That's not mine to do. What I would do is say, I'm here.
Yeah.
What do you need? And how can we help you get what you need? Because people are remarkably smart and resilient, even when they're not. And the answers lie with them.
Yeah.
Right. And assuming, now I'm wanting to not, I'm making an assumption here that somebody is able to move in the world in a way that gets, most of their needs met. I'm aware that there are mental illnesses that make that impossible. So I don't want to say, oh, just, the wisdom is inside. If there are circumstances whereby that might not be the case, and I want to name that. However, assuming it's, my friends or my neighbors or someone that I have enough relationship with, and that's important, to say, how can I help? What might you need? That's really different than here's what you should do.
Absolutely.
Right? Because what I don't want to do is set up a situation where the wisdom lies with me, when in fact the wisdom lies with them. And my job, I think, as a leader, as a friend, as a person who cares, is for, sometimes the most helpful thing I can do is just listen and help them see the beauty of themselves, or their own resilience, perhaps, is a better thing to talk about.
Yeah, and I like how you said that, because I think when we pose that to a person, that empowerment and control they then have to enter their own mind and find their own answers, which, as we all know, we can't be forced into doing something we don't have desire to do. It has to come within ourselves to be able to make real changes in ourselves, and for other things, it has to be our own desire. Absolutely. So I think that's beautiful, to just offer support. And I think that really shows right there how you two are so different in your being able to change the way our leaders are working now. Because when do they stop and say, how can we help? What do you need? Rather, they're saying, here are the rules, here are the laws, here are the things that we're giving you, here are the boundaries we're giving you, deal with it. Interesting.
Well, I want to actually say, I want to ask Rajasvini to answer that, because my friend here is very good at saying, here are the boundaries. Here's what our expectations. So it's not an either or. Can you say something about that, Rajasvini?
Yeah, no, I think what you have reminded us, Akaya, in your comments, is that it's very easy to fall prey. The easy part of leadership is to pretend to be an expert. That's the easy part, right? Expertise gives you a lot of protection. You can be like, I'm the expert, and so here are the ways I see the world. And sometimes we can also use the veneer of being an expert to not do our own internal work. And then we can be very messy as leaders. So I think the call is to be touched at a heart level by suffering, by pain, and again, trying to fix things is a way to not actually be with them. And I think the invitation that Akaya was sharing was, when someone is struggling, whether on our team or in our collaborations or in our family, the invitation is to actually fully be with that and to support the person in coming up with their own solutions. And that's higher order work. It's harder than just simply solving it. That's when we do that part, it's just so much more cathartic and like gives our ego a big boost. But does it really lead to a sustainable solution for the person being impacted? So that's the great question.
Well, but where I was going was a slightly different place, Rajasvini, which is you're extraordinarily good at setting clear boundaries.
Yeah.
So that people, it's not so much do this thing and these are the rules in the way that Sandy was talking about. You have a gift for being very clear in terms of your expectations, and even with folks who are struggling. So that's what I wanted to thank you for that. But that you've got a particular skill set there.
Yeah. First of all, it's Sarah, not Sandy.
No worries.
Sorry. See,
Sandy,
okay.
I'll take it.
I should stick with SJ. I'm sorry.
Hey, you could do that too, right? I'm completely phonetic, so don't trust me to say it.
But no, I hear you. I don't know why I'm good at it. I can say that I've had a lot of practice at watching my own messes unfold and noticing that I get into messy when I am indirect with my communication, circumspect, and caught up in this internal anxiety about assuming that people are fragile. And assuming that someone can't take good feedback or can't hear something that is negative or constructive or whatever amount of adjectives we want to put on it. So I have leaned into a practice of trusting the trust and the basis of our relationship. And in the basis of the strength of a relationship, a lot can happen, including direct communication. Not everybody is skillful at receiving feedback. Not everybody is skillful at not making a story out of a simple intervention, right? But then the piece of work I've had to do on myself is to be clear about what my role is. My job is not to make everybody love me and adore me and never be upset with me. My job is to align ourselves towards a common shared purpose and goal, which happens to be in my day-to-day job to be around movement building. And then around other parts of my work is to kind of actually have a unified set of principles with which we are working towards social change. And so if that's my purpose and that's what I'm here to do, and that's where my leadership skills matter, then everything I do is in service of that. And sometimes there will be oops, ouch moments, and it's okay. We can rebuild trust as long as we know that we're working towards that goal together.
Yeah. And you can do it with grace and understanding and dignity to others. You don't have to do it to where you're unraveling relationships, right? I mean, when you learn how to, like you said, speak directly from your heart, it usually comes across as just that. It's not coming across in your trying to manipulate or have control in your mind over something.
We talk a lot about the importance of being very kind and never nice. That leaders getting stuck in niceness means that they're not actually telling the truth about what's going on.
Very interesting.
When we're nice, generally when we're kids, we get told, oh, be nice, which means don't say what you're actually seeing. Don't speak to what you're experiencing here. Right. So we learn to shut down and be nice. Being kind allows us to be expansive, right? And to say, oh, yes, this is going on. This needs intervention. I can do this with a heart of kindness, and I can say really things that are difficult to hear, right? When I talk about feedback, there's feedback that's, that I love to hear, and then there's feedback that I don't prefer. But that doesn't make that feedback that I don't prefer wrong. It just means I don't prefer it.
Mm-hmm.
I still will need it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if I don't get that kind of supportive, kind, hard feedback, then I can't grow and get better as a leader. So we think it's really important to never be nice and always be kind, or reach for it.
Yeah, that's really, really great, because I think I would find, I am a little bit too gentle in the world sometimes and I tend to be hurt way too much. So I think that trying to align myself within, I always try to be kind, but at the same time, I always try to be nice. Now I can look at that effectively and see where that is actually hurting me instead of helping. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. I've learned so much today with you ladies. I'm just so overwhelmed and like taking it all in and processing the information and wondering how I can better help to be a great leader in the autism world, and how to show my boundaries that are probably the thing that I struggle with the most. And so I'm going to work on how I can help better build those. Definitely.
I want to reflect back, SJ, Sarah, that you are already playing a huge role. And I would invite you to take time to celebrate all of the ways in which you impacted so many families, trying to navigate the world with autism. The little things you have shared, including your own learnings, have shown me that you move in the world with humility, and congratulations. And that you're really a good organizer of people too. And so keeping on. And
yeah,
I think one of the things that gets in the way of having good boundaries is when we believe that it's all on us. And so one practice that really helps me is to remember that I'm a part of a much larger whole, in a universe sense, like we're just stardust on an ecosystem level. I have one particular role to play, but it's not the whole thing. And that there are many others that are equally leaderful, if not more, that I get to play with and I get to work with and I get to learn from. And so when things get overwhelming, to just be reminded there's a whole lot of people who are both following you, but also willing to step in where you create the vacuum. So
that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I want to really remind you to trust your heart. You've got deep wisdom. You've shown it to us. I've seen it on your other podcasts, and don't doubt that.
Thank you.
Right, because you're bringing something to the world that is precious and necessary.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you both on today and to learn so much about myself, about you both. And can you tell us where we can go to find the book and get more information about that? Your website, social medias. Give us the good stuff.
So the website is leadingwithjoybook.com. leadingwithjoybook.com. And it has connections to all the places you can order the books. It also has connections to Leading with Joy, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc.
And I just found out, because I could order it from my local library. So it's there too.
Great.
The ebook is there. We also have it's on Audible. So for folks who'd rather consume, read through hearing, that's available too.
Love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's perfect. And I'll make sure to have that accessible for everyone so they can go straight to that link and check this out. it's been such a pleasure and an honor to not only learn from you guys today, but and be able to look at myself. And I was thinking as we were talking, do you see joy from a place of not having joy, or do you see it while you're having joy? What do you both think about that?
I think it's both.
Me too.
I'm aware now when I don't have access to joy. I can feel it, and I'm very aware when I'm in it, right? Because I'm honing, again, my practice is honing my skills there. But I don't think there are those who say that the greatest amount of joy, it has something to do with how much grief and hardship we've been through, right? And I think there's some truth to that having been through some very challenging things, both of us individually, that my capacity for joy is much greater, having gone through some really challenging times in my life. So,
yeah. Absolutely.
Agreed.
Thank you guys. Oh, hi. Excuse me for saying so. Thank you both for being here so much today. I really appreciated the time that we've been able to spend together, and I know that it will be great value and to listen to this, to watch this later for my viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for having the time and the patience and desire to keep coming back and watching and supporting. We will have all the show notes, information, links to the book and to social medias. Thank you so much for being here today, and we'll definitely be in touch.
Thanks so much, SJ.
thank you.